And so I really just want to touch on the points that if you're afraid of taking medications, or you feel that you're falling away from God by going to a doctor, going to a psychiatrist, or even if you just think that you're lacking faith in God altogether, you're just betraying God, you're betraying your faith, or you think that your Christian brothers and sisters are going to look at you differently, I'm just here to make this video and say that you're not alone. You can be a person that lives a successful life, that walks in God's will, that carries out his callings, that ministers and provides support and helps other people, and carries out the great commission of God while being on an antidepressant, while being on an anti-anxiety medication, while being on ADHD medication. It feels like in the church, people really avoid talking about mental health, and medication has so much of a negative stigma. It can be called demonic, or you're sinning by doing it, or it's a form of witchcraft. And I just want to give reassurance and a little bit of comfort to whoever watches this video. And I don't know, maybe you just want to hear it from somebody that has the same beliefs as you. So from a God-fearing, Jesus-following son of God, I'm gonna give you my story on how I feel about medication, my history with medication, and the current medications that I take right now to treat the things that I go through. Oh yeah, I'm also gonna be driving and moving around a bit because I got things to do, so we gonna get gas first. All right, basically, I think I'll start off with just the mental health things that diagnosis is the right word. The mental health diagnosis that I've dealt with, when it all started, and just give a little bit of background of the different treatments that I tried beforehand, leading up to when I got on medication, along with, some of the reactions that I had to medications. And there's my music. I make music, by the way. So starting in high school, I was first diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I'd have panic attacks here and there, but it wasn't anything super major. Parents were like, all right, you got to go to therapy. I was in therapy for maybe like a month max, and then I just stopped going. I didn't really understand mental illness or that whole world like that really. And I'd say around that time, medication wasn't something that was really discussed or talked about. So I'd say it wasn't until about midway through college, I was probably about 20 years old at the time, where the anxiety that I was dealing with and the depression was really in a bad enough spot to where I was like, okay, I need to consider other remedies. I need to consider actually going to therapy. During that time, I have to say it was pretty bad. I was in a place where I was having panic attacks every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. At that point, you start to get really depressed, because it's you can't really live life. You can't really do the things that you enjoy. A lot of the depression that I was experiencing that time was just a byproduct of the high anxiety that I had during that time. And so I would say there was about a 3-month period where I was wrestling. I was really in a place, and this is one of the things that almost gave me anxiety, is that it felt like nothing was working. I'm like, is it a demon that I have to get cast out of me? Is it some anxiety or things? Is there sin in my life? I was very confused from a faith perspective of how do I deal with this beast? How do I deal with this thing that's overwhelming me? During that time, a lot of my faith just took a hit because I'm anxious all the time. I'm having anxiety. I'm not trusting in God. I started having fears of oh, maybe I'm not saved. Maybe I'll go to hell. Maybe all of these different things. And it just added to my anxiety. And after those 3 months, I was in a place where probably a lot of you guys are right now, where I was wrestling with that. All right, I think I got to take medication. Is it sinful to do this? Am I not having faith in God by taking these medications? Am I abandoning my faith by doing this? I'm not going to lie. It was hard, and I wrestled with it for a while. I remember I went to my doctor. I told him all of the things that I was dealing with, and he prescribed me an anti-anxiety medication. The type of medication that my doctor prescribed me is called an SSRI. There's a lot of different types of medications that fall under that SSRI category. I won't say specifics of which ones, sometimes some that might work for me might not work for other people, or certain reactions that I might have to them. Other people won't have reactions to them. But ultimately, when he put me on that medication, I sat just having the bottle sitting in my room, staring at it every single day. When's the first day I'm going to take the medication? When's the first day I'm going to take it? And I basically waited until the anxiety was in such a crippling state where it's like that was my last resort. And I'll say this, medication is not the last resort. Is it necessarily the first resort either? I'd say no, but it's one of those things where health, mental health especially, there's so many factors and so many things that are combined with each other that leads to your healing. And so to save you guys the suspense, I ended up taking that medication, and it turns out that I'm very sensitive to medication, and like a lot of the anxiety that I had was health anxiety. And so when I took that first dose, it was a little bit too high and I had some pretty severe anxiety as a reaction to it. This resulted in some pretty bad panic attacks, and I ended up having to be put on a different class of anti-anxiety medication. But basically that class of drugs falls under the benzodiazepine. If you guys follow any of my music, Elijah the Prophet on like Spotify, Apple Music, all that, I do talk about how I struggled getting off of benzodiazepines, how I struggled getting off of certain pills, certain medications. And this class of medications, it's not similar to SSRIs. It's its whole different group. Like this is where you hear about Xanax or Ativan or Klonopin. Usually this is what's given to people when they have panic attacks or a panic disorder. And usually within 5, 15, 30 minutes, all anxiety is gone. It puts you to sleep. It can make you very drowsy. It's very powerful in stopping anxiety in the moment. However, coming off of the medication, that same anxiety can come back. So it's a great short-term solution, but it's not a great long-term solution. So when I started taking that medication, it was very brief. Usually it's never more than a couple weeks that you're on it, or else you can start to build up a dependence for it and you can get addicted. And so I got off that medication, and after that I was like, I am like, forget the spiritual side of things, forget whether people say it's demonic or not, or forget whether I'm not having faith in God. I was just like, I hate medication. That experience was terrible. I never want to be on it. And so I started looking for natural remedies or different things to do. This is just a side note. When you have mental health issues, so many other things play a factor. Whether you're working out, how much you're eating, if you're eating right, the food and sodas or drinks and all that stuff that you put into your body, it plays a role in your mental health. And so the same way that I said before that medication isn't the last resort, but it's not also the first resort, everything plays together. You know, medication could go hand in hand with a good sleep schedule and a good diet, and also with a good exercise plan and getting into the gym, and then also therapy. You bring everything together, and that's what promotes the most healing mentally. But back to the story, coming out of that time and after being on that medication and having the reaction to it, I was like, okay, I'm not doing medication, but I will commit to therapy. I started going to therapy. It was helping. I started researching into supplements. Things like ashwagandha came up. Things like what else was it? Taking magnesium or certain stuff with your stomach and gut health, because I was researching that like serotonin and your gut health promotes like mental health. And so basically for a year straight, I went the whole natural route. I just did therapy. I just did supplements, got my vitamin D levels all together, and that helped. I was in a place that was better than where I was before, but I don't think during that time that any of the underlying real issues were being treated at that time. So by the end of that year, coming into this next year, I'd say this was around 2024, maybe. Around that time, my mental health started to get worse, and I actually started to take it a little bit more seriously. And after doing a little bit of researching, which I've realized in that moment was a compulsion, I finally got the specific help that I needed. Was I got diagnosed with OCD, which is an anxiety disorder, but it's characterized where you have certain obsessions that are centered around your anxiety and compulsions that you do as a result of it. So I took the reins. I started treating with an OCD specific therapist. There was some improvement, but because of certain life situations and life factors that were going on and just stress that I was having in my environment, fell back into panic attacks, fell back into just high anxiety. My relationship with God was just pulling away again. I was losing faith in him, and I was like, I'm not getting better. I'm not getting healed. I thought I was taking a step in the right direction. I thought I was trusting God for stuff. And all of those just spiritual battles began to resurface again. And at that time, what felt just like the most devastating blow is that a lot of those medications I had gotten off on the year before, I had to start taking those for months at a time. So I was back on those benzodiazepines to help with sleep. I was put on a low dose of an anti-depressant, and then they were also trialing certain anxiety medications, and to no avail, a lot of them weren't working. Until I found a doctor that treated, a psychiatrist specifically, that treated OCD specifically. And that's where I believe things started to turn around. They put me on a medication that had a lot of success with people who are also dealing with OCD. I was able to get off the whole string of medications that I was on before, and ultimately make a turn towards being on a set of medications that didn't have negative long-term side effects, allowed me to live more of a fulfilling life, and something that I just wasn't really scared about. And so currently at this time, I am on technically 3-ish medications. There's one medication that I'm still on that helps with sleep. I have terrible sleep and issues with that as well. But basically, I'm on 2 actual medications. One is an anti-anxiety medication, and the other medication that I'm on right now are ADHD medications. That comes down the road, and maybe I'll talk about that in another video about dealing with ADHD as a Christian, working and, struggling to work, getting on medication, stuff like that. But I want to pivot now to the main point of the video to really address some of the stigma and just negative view I feel like Christianity and the church can have on medication. You'll see videos online of people throwing down their medications at the altar and saying, oh, like God's healed me. I don't need to rely on these medications. I reject the diagnosis that my doctor said. I don't claim this over me. I'm not going to profess these certain things. Like, in theory, all of that looks good, but what it does is it creates a stigma. It creates this sort of environment where if you take medication, you don't have faith in God. Where if you go see a doctor, if you try and treat with anything outside of prayer, outside of worship, outside of reading your Bible, you're not a Christian. And I want to say that's just a lie. That's not the truth. And so I just want to add that in my relationship, in my walk with God, especially when it first started, God would really just minister to me about the body, the 3 parts of our being. We're made up of body, soul, and spirit. The same way that God is a Trinity, we also are 3-part beings. Issues with the spirit can affect the soul. Issues with the soul can affect the body. Issues with the body can affect the spirit. Everything all plays into one another. And so for some reason, when there's a person in the church who has diabetes and they take medication and they have insulin that they're taking, that's seen as something that's okay, or that's seen as something that, like, yes, you should go and take your medication. But when it comes down to medications that are there to support our soul, our mental well-being, those medications are looked down upon. And so being someone who's currently a Christian, y'all see in my YouTube channel, I go out, I preach the gospel, I evangelize, I'm there at church on Sundays, I've got a prayer life, I worship, I read my Bible, I know the word. I still take medication. I still have anxiety that I struggle with because of environmental circumstances or genetic things that are passed on to me, or whatever way that you think it came about. There's still things that I struggle with. It doesn't make me any less Christian, and it doesn't make you any less Christian either. It takes faith to trust God for the long term. It takes faith to trust that day after day after day, God is going to sustain you. He's going to provide you not just that daily manna that sustains your body, but that daily peace that sustains your mind. There were so many days I would wake up and wish that all my anxiety would be gone. There were so many days I would wake up and just pray, Lord, like, if it's your will, just let me never have panic attacks again. Let me never have to deal with anxiety. But it was in dealing with these things that I drew closer to God. All right, I made it to the mall, and before I go in, I want to talk directly to you guys to just address your concerns, really give some reassurance to some of the fears that you might have, and really just tear down the stigma that you might hear from other Christians. And so I really just want to touch on the points that if you're afraid of taking medications, or you feel that you're falling away from God by going to a doctor, going to a psychiatrist, or even if you just think that you're lacking faith in God altogether, you're just betraying God, you're betraying your faith, or you think that your Christian brothers and sisters are going to look at you differently, I'm just here to make this video and say that you're not alone. You can be a person that lives a successful life, that walks in God's will, that carries out his callings, that ministers and provides support and helps other people, and carries out the great commission of God while being on an antidepressant, while being on an anti-anxiety medication, while being on ADHD medication. I'm gonna try and speed run before this camera dies. I'm gonna speed run through some stuff. Being on medication does not mean that you're not being of sober mind. Having mental health illnesses or claiming that does not mean that you're confessing some negative spirit or demon over you. Mental health diagnoses are neutral. It's just what is. The same way if you had cancer, you have cancer. Yes, we prescribe meaning to that and we say that cancer sucks, but it's just a diagnosis, a statement of you're experiencing a level of anxiety, a level of depression, a level of ADHD that is more or in the extreme range to where you get characterized by that. Does that have to become your whole personality? Does that have to become your whole being and control your life? No. But you have to acknowledge a problem so that you're able to treat it. Next speed run. Don't just cold turkey your medications because you believe that God healed you. That's a terrible idea, and it's going to lead to worse side effects. You're not going to go to hell if you take medication. Medication, what they call pharmacy, like pharma something, kudos, whatever, witchcraft stuff. I don't know. Sounds like a bunch of baloney to me. What else? You could be on medication for a long time. You could be on it for a short time and just a season. Being on medication does not mean that you'll be on it forever. You could eventually get off of it. I'll be real with you. Medication might not work the first time. You might have to go around the second time or the third time or the fourth time. That's what sort of sucks about it. It's a little bit of trial and error. But that's where faith comes in, and you have the ability to strengthen your relationship with God in that time. What's another one? Yeah, that's all I got. But I'll say this. Medication is something that can take the place of God. Anything in the world, money, food, entertainment, all the things, they can take the place of God. I approach medication with a heart posture that God is going to provide healing in my life. God is going to fulfill his word because his word never fails. And if he promised us a peace that transcends understanding, he will make any way possible for that to be accomplished. And so I looked at medication as a way that God was providing. Yeah, camera's about to die. I'm in the video on this. If you're scared, have a little bit of faith. Sometimes faith looks like taking that pill. Sometimes faith looks like not a microwave miracle, but the time and trial and error that it takes to get onto medication, build up a healthy lifestyle and routine that promotes your healing. If this video helped you in any way, I ask that you help me continue to help you by hitting that like, hitting that subscribe, watch some of my other videos, go listen to my music, and turn on them post notifications. And I'll catch y'all. I had to change my ways. Lord found me in that dirt. I did a whole 180.